Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of The Lindsay Elmore Show. For years, it was thought that once the brain finalizes its growth, that there is nothing else that it needs to do, that it's hardwired and fixed. My guest today, Dr. Michael Merzenich, has spent more than 30 years researching the plasticity of the brain and how brains can quickly and easily make chemical, structural, and functional changes at any age and with any concomitant disease. He teaches us how we can optimize our personal performance by using brain exercises specifically designed to enhance the plasticity of our brain. BrainHQ has been used by everyone from Tom Brady to military service people to children with Down syndrome and autism. In just a few minutes a day, can your brain really change? Let's get to the show. Welcome to The Lindsay Elmore Show, a podcast for people who deserve to be healthy, with honest, open, and enlightening conversations with doctors, thought leaders, creatives, and spiritual gurus. You'll walk away with simple and tangible tips and tricks that allow you to live your healthiest life so you can pursue your dreams, overcome obstacles, and leave your mark. Dr. Michael Merzenich is the professor emeritus of the University of California, San Francisco, and he is also a co-founder, chairman, and chief scientific officer of Posit Science, the makers of BrainHQ, online brain exercises and assessments. The BrainHQ app is used in more than 150 countries to help users improve their brain health. Dr. Merzenich is widely credited for his seminal experiences proving lifelong brain plasticity, that the brain is capable of making chemical, structural, and functional changes at any and every age. He is also the first person to harness plasticity for human benefit with his co-invention of the cochlear implant, which has restored hearing to hundreds of thousands of people with deafness. For the past 30 years, Dr. Merzenich has pioneered the use of plasticity-based computerized brain exercises to help people improve their brain health and performance. For his work on brain plasticity, he has been awarded the Cavil Laureate in Neuroscience, which is the highest honor in the field. He has also been honored by each of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, as well as receiving many other awards. Dr. Merzenich is the author and co-author of more than 100 science and medical journal articles and is on more than 100 patents. He has also helped to co-author several science and medical books. For lay audiences, he wrote the book Softwired: How the New Science of Brain Plasticity Can Change Your Life. Dr. Michael Merzenich, welcome to the Lindsay Elmore Show.
It's nice to be with you, Lindsay.
I am thrilled to get to talk to you today. My listeners have been hearing me say this like a broken record. My grandmother, who I loved and adored, recently passed away in January, and she was a queen of crossword puzzles and brain activities and brain training. And I remember my family had this really tough moment as she began to get older. We tried to teach her Sudoku, and she could not get it, could not comprehend it, could not understand it, and she very rapidly became much more senile after that time. And you are an expert in brain plasticity, and this is something that I first heard about when I graduated pharmacy school and read The Brain That Changes Itself. I think most people think that the brain kind of reached this terminus where you can't change it anymore. It's just hardwired the way that it is. But your research has convinced you that the brain remains plastic all throughout life. Give us a crash course introduction into what does that mean? What does that mean to have a plastic brain?
Well, it's usually talked about, Lindsay, in terms of the brain's wiring. And classically, not too many years ago, it was believed that the brain basically completed its basic wiring by the time you were 1 or 2 years of age. And unlike any other organ, the brain was imagined to have grown up when you were a baby and was basically hardwired, fixed in its connectivity from that point forward until you died. And it's another way of saying it really only had one way to go from that point forward, and that was to deteriorate. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. And I might say there were complex reasons why scientists and medical doctors believe this, and educators believe this. They were all wrong. We now know that the brain is continuously changing its wiring. And we know that every time you acquire an ability or improve at any ability, you account for that improvement or you account for that acquisition of ability by actually rewiring your brain. And you're doing that, of course, all through your life, because you know, and I know, that even an old person, a person near the end of life, can acquire a new skill or ability. It can improve an ability if they really work at it, right? And the fact that you can do that is evidence beyond unequivocal evidence. Of course, we've extended that evidence in umpty-ump studies in humans and in animals. And we now know in great detail how those changes occur. But Lindsay, I want to say something else about the brain changing itself. It's not just changing its wiring. The brain is like your body. When you exercise it, everything changes. Everything that relates to it changes for the better. Now, commonly what we do in life is we exercise a lot when we're young. We're in a learning mode. We're in a brain change mode. We're acquiring our master skills and abilities, and then we more or less use those skills and abilities for the rest of our life. And we're no longer in the same sort of intense acquisitional mode as we are as children or as young adults. We rest on our laurels. We become users and not developers of our brain power. And in fact, we have the capacity to continue to change our brain in a positive way. And in fact, we need to do that to sustain ourselves. It's just like your body. An unexercised brain is an unhealthy brain. And you can demonstrate that in all kinds of ways. So let me just say one more thing, and then I'll actually let you ask a question. We did experiments now about a dozen years ago. They began about a dozen years ago. They were initially led by a wonderful Canadian neurologist in my laboratory at the University of Cali, Etienne de Villers-Sidani. And basically what we did was to look at a whole series of things, initially 17 things, ultimately more than 30 things, that applied to the brains of animals that were near the end of life. And we looked at those same 30 things that applied for the brains of animals in the prime of life. So animals either full of it, active, just really with, you could say at the most competent level of performance in life, or the animal's about to die, not so far away from the end of life. Now, the first thing we asked was, how many of these things are different? Now, these were physical things. These were functional things. These were chemical things. And they didn't just relate to wiring. They related also to all kinds of other things that related to brain physicality and brain performance, to the support of nutrients, to the brain's ability to defend itself, a whole series of things like this. Everything was different. Everything was different, very different. Then we asked ourselves, well, how many of these things advantage the old brain? And the answer was none of them. In every way, the young brain is faster, more reliable, it's more heavily myelinated, it's more elaborate in its connections, it's the way that it's gathering information, it's much more complicated and sophisticated, it's much more coordinated, it's much more physically healthy, it's getting more oxygen, it's getting more, everything is better. And then we asked the third question. How many of these things that define or distinguish a brain near the end of life from a brain in the prime of life are reversible? How many of these things will change when we engage the brain in what we imagine to be appropriate forms of training? And the answer was All of them. Everything's reversible. Everything on the list is reversible, and not just a little bit reversible. In an animal model, you can drive almost everything back to the state of an animal, or near the state of an animal in the prime of life. And another thing happens to the animal that's really rather astounding. The animal is no longer near the end of life. So we saw these animals now feisty again. You could say full of it again. And we began to ask ourselves, exploratory again, in all kinds of other ways, indicating that they were, in a sense, behaving more youthfully. So we asked the simple question in this initial experiment: if we do nothing more than to train these animals and then see how long they'll live, just train them for a period of about a month in the end of their life, and then see how long they'll live. Life was extended. In this case, these were rats. They weren't humans or monkeys, by 40%. Now we know now why that life was probably extended, because we know now that when we train the brain in the right kind of way, we know that we actually upregulate the processes that influence from the brain, that influence the autonomic nervous system and the immune response in the body. So we're actually changing physical health by improving brain health. I say, well, is that surprising? I mean, the brain is a primary regulator of physical health, of your respiratory processes or your vascular processes. Every organ is receiving information from the brain. Every organ is shipping information to the brain. But this aspect of brain to body health has been way underrepresented. We emphasize over and over again the powers of body to brain health, which are real. There are real influences of, and it's really important that a person, you could say, sustain to the best of their ability physical health in the body. Absolutely. But it's equally, if not more important, that they maintain organic brain health.